مرحبا بكم مشاهدينا إلى حوارات السياق. على مدى شهور راقب المجتمع الدولي والمهتمون بالشأن السوري خطوات الإدارة الأمريكية الجديدة في تعاملها نحو هذه الأزمة، وأعلنت وزارة الخزانة الأمريكية رسميا تعديلاتها في قانون العقوبات على سوريا بالسماح بالتعاملات المحدودة مع النظام تحت غطاء الدعم الإنساني للجماعات غير الحكومية. عموما للمزيد من المتابعة حول هذا الملف ينضم إلينا ماثيو زفايج الباحث في مؤسسة الدفاع عن الديمقراطيات. مرحبا ماثيو.
Hello, how are you?
ماثيو، ما سر توقيت اتخاذ إدارة بايدن قرارا يتيح للمنظمات غير الحكومية التعامل مع نظام الأسد؟
Well, I think you're dealing with an overall trend within the Biden administration towards greater humanitarian access, greater access not just for humanitarian organizations, but also for NGOs, which was made clear in its 2021 or in the Treasury Department's 2021 sanctions review. That being said, one of the critiques that we have had of the Biden administration's overall approach stems from the lack of effective guardrails and limitations on that access, particularly in the Syria context.
أفهم من كلامك أنه لم يأتي بعد المحادثة الهاتفية بين الرئيسين بايدن وبوتين؟
I can't say definitively that it is or it isn't. I could say that you've seen a general softening of sanctions under the Biden administration towards the Syrian regime, particularly when it comes to the targeting of senior financiers.
هل تعتقد أن الأمر سيساعد حقا السوريين أم هو بمثابة طوق نجاة للنظام السوري؟
Well, I mean, the Syrian regime has demonstrated its ability for many years to manipulate aid providers up to including the United Nations via intimidation, infiltration, and surveillance. Aid organizations and NGOs that operate in areas under the regime's control really have no choice but to accept kind of a constant interference in their activities. That being said, when we saw the administration's new guidance on Syria, providing NGOs greater latitude to do business directly with the government of Syria, we didn't see effective guardrails such as independent monitoring requirements, etc., also put in place by the administration, and very clear directives from the administration on what activities are impermissible, right? Such as early recovery programs utilizing property that has been seized, confiscated, or otherwise taken from vulnerable refugee populations, both internally and externally.
البعض اعتبر القرار خطوة لإعادة سوريا للمجتمع الدولي، ما رأيك؟
I wouldn't say that it is, or I wouldn't say that it isn't. I'd say that the administration's action on this particular issue as relatively consistent with other practices. For example, last week, the administration also issued fairly wide-ranging, very permissible regulations with respect to aid organizations, NGOs, and others doing business in Afghanistan. I think what may be a greater indicator of the administration's positioning on Syria, particularly when it comes to sanctions, are twofold. Number one, the non-implementation of the Syria Civilian Protection Act and attendant sanctions. The prior administration, towards the end of the administration, had engaged in a significant ramp up in the targeting of senior Syrian regime financiers. This administration has yet to designate a senior financier associated with the Assad regime. You've also seen I think that's probably one of the best examples of the current administration's movement away from what had been a longstanding consensus within the United States government and also within Congress on the need to effectively target the Assad regime utilizing coercive economic measures.
طيب هنا ما الذي على الإدارة الأمريكية فعله لضمان وصول أهداف القرار إلى المستفيدين المقصودين؟ هنا هم المدنيون طبعا.
I'm saying that it's very difficult to ensure that the civilian population in Syria will really benefit from this new guidance, right? Given the Assad regime's past manipulation of aid providers, international organizations, etc. I think it'll be difficult.
في سياق حديثك، هل إعادة إعمار سوريا أيضا يمكن اعتبارها من الملفات الداعمة للأسد؟
Well, I think the introduction of a new term, right, or of a relatively new term called early recovery, could serve as a slippery slope to engaging in reconstruction-related activities if the administration does not place sufficient guardrails on NGOs and NGOs and others doing business directly with the regime under what's called this general license.
قصفت إسرائيل أهدافاً لحزب الله اللبناني في سوريا، ما مدى توغل تلك الميليشيات في الأراضي السورية؟
I think you've seen it fairly obvious that they have. I think one of the new and more interesting variables that you're now dealing with, both with the regime and Hezbollah, is the narcotics trade, particularly with respect to Captagon, which is a amphetamine like drug that has been produced at industrial capabilities, industrial scale, in that particular region.
تعتقد أن التحرك العربي الأخير تجاه سوريا جاء بمباركة أمريكية؟
I think if it didn't have the American blessing, it wouldn't move forward. I think if the Americans were standing resolute against any regional rapprochement, I don't think that the Jordanians in particular would have gone forward. Well, I mean, I think it signals kind of I think it has signaled I wouldn't say a change in policy, but a change in approach with respect to change in the administration's approach towards the Syrian regime. I'd say actually one of the other kind of constantly overlooked aspects of this is the fact that Iran continues to openly provide both the Assad regime and Hezbollah with millions of dollars, right, worth of oil, and yet you've seen the administration not take significant action against those entities and those persons and those entities involved in that trade under the Biden administration, be it a sanction, be it an indictment, or be it any other type of restrictive or any other type of restrictive measure.
كيف يفترض أن تتعامل إدارة بايدن مع الأزمة السورية؟
So for example, in October, right, Secretary of State Blinken reaffirmed the administration's commitment to securing a political solution to Syria in line with United Nations Security Council Resolution 2254. Noting that the administration had not lifted a single sanction on Syria or changed its position to oppose reconstruction. And I think the administration's actions have been kind of at odds with that statement. I think the administration beginning to build leverage with respect to the Assad regime, through the use of coercive economic measures, including sanctions, is an important first step. I'm not here saying that, sanctions will bring down the Assad regime, but I think it's an important mechanism and it's an important tool to build leverage, right, to convince or compel the regime to conclude an agreement in line with international standards, specifically that Security Council resolution.
ماثيو زفايج الباحث في مؤسسة الدفاع عن الديمقراطيات، شكرا جزيلا لك للمشاركة معنا في حوارات السياق.
Thank you so much for having me.
شكرا على طيب المتابعة. إلى الملتقى.